Hello and welcome. My name is Rebecca Schlafer, and I am thrilled that you are joining us for the first of a four-part series focused on support through separation, coping with the physical and emotional separation. Today's webinar is going to focus on support for the birthing person. And as you know, there are going to be three subsequent webinars focused on support for the caregiver in the community in October of 2021, support for the birthing person and baby during the period of incarceration, and another final webinar on the birthing person and baby during the period of reunification. Today's webinar is hosted by the University of Minnesota Twin Cities Center for Leadership Education in Maternal and Child Public Health. Please note that we are recording this webinar, which will be posted on our center's website, where you will be able to find this and other materials on the topic. This webinar series is brought to you by the Cross-Center Collaboration for the Health of Justice-Involved Women and Children. We're a group of formerly or currently funded, HRSA-funded faculty, staff, and students working on research, policy, and training issues and topics at the intersection of incarceration and maternal and child health. Some JIWC institutional members are part of a network of 13 centers of excellence in maternal and child health education, science, and practice, housed at universities across the nation and funded through the Maternal and Child Health Bureau. We're grateful for funding from HRSA, which allows us to do this work and provides you with the opportunity to hear from today's panelists. While we're gathered virtually, it's important to acknowledge that our institutions are situated on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples. In Minnesota, we're gathered on the land of the Dakota. We're taking this moment to consider their histories, languages, and cultural, and we invite you to do the same wherever you are joining from. We'd also like to take a moment today to ground ourselves and create some space for you to join this session with us. We're thrilled to welcome Tanjireese to lead a grounding exercise. Tanji is a Detroit native, creative preventionist, and founder of 1124, a program dedicated to reimagining prevention through a lens of liberation and community. In her many years of youth serving in gender-based violence work, she has held roles as a prevention program director, National Community Initiatives Coordinator, and Senior Program Officer working with incarcerated survivors of sexual abuse. Tanji holds a bachelor's degree in behavioral science and a master's degree in education, leadership, and change. Driven by the belief that everyone has a role in gender-based violence prevention, her motto is, "It's up to us to define what our role will be." Tanji, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you, and I'm excited to learn more from you. I wanted to start off with a grounding activity because it's good for us to take notice of where we are with our bodies, especially when we're gathering in information. But also, this is something that can be used to work with folks who are behind bars. It's also a technique that they can use as well. So wherever you are, if you're seated like most of us might be at a desk, I just ask you to get comfortable where you are. Wherever that is, make sure your feet are planted on the ground. And I want to start off by just taking 3 really intentional deep breaths. So first, just inhale in, and you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Take a deep inhale in and exhale. Another one, inhale in and exhale. And one more time, inhale in and exhale. So now I want you to imagine that there is a big, beautiful ball of light that is sitting at the top of your head, at the crown of your head. Now I want you to let that light go through your head and let it rest where your face is. And take notice of your face. Are you holding tension anywhere? For some of us, we might crease our foreheads. Our eyebrows may come tighter together. We might have a tense jaw. So I want to take a moment to just release that. So take an inhale in, and when you exhale, loosen up those parts of your face that might feel tight. Now I want us to let that ball of light flow down through our neck, You might find your head turning to the side if you want to give a little stretch if you can. Now let it release through your shoulders. Sometimes we hold tension in our shoulders. We might have them tense and tighten up. So use this as an opportunity to release that. Take a big inhale in. Exhale through your mouth. And when you release, allow your shoulders to drop. One more time, inhale in. And exhale. Now maybe you find yourself moving your shoulders forward. You can move them backwards. Now we're gonna take that ball of light and we're gonna let it split. It's gonna split through both of our arms, down through our fingers. You might wanna give your fingers a little wiggle. Now I want you to place one hand on your chest and one hand on your torso. And I want you to take a deep breath in and release. Again, deep breath in and release. And keep this pattern of breathing. And while you feel it, you might feel your chest expand. Maybe your belly, where your other hand is expanding. And use this as a moment just to be present with yourself. You probably came here with a lot today. Probably have things you have to do after this. But for right now, just give yourself a chance just to sit wherever you are.
Let it out, let it out. Breathe in and let it go. Breathe in and let it out. Breathe in and let it go. Breathe in and let it out. Breathe in and let it go. Breathe in and let it out. Breathe in and let it go. Breathe in.
And while you're still breathing, allow that light to flow down through your body, through your tailbone. We hold a lot of tension in our hips, a lot of stress and pressure in our hips. So maybe you're rocking side to side just to release that and to feel more centered with yourself. Allow that light to flow down through your legs, through your knees. Maybe you want to stretch them out if you can. Allow yourself to wiggle your toes. And then allow that light to flow all the way through the bottom of your feet. And continue to breathe. A few more deep breaths. Thank you all for being a part of that practice. I hope that you feel less stressed. I hope you feel a bit more relaxed and grounded after that.
Tanji, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful space and grounding. What a wonderful way to begin our time together today. I especially needed that, given the first few minutes of the way this started for me a minute ago. So thank you for that very much. I want to start our time together by providing folks with a bit of background on today's topic. I know that many of you are joining us with considerable expertise on this topic, and others are just beginning your journey to learn about mass incarceration and its impact on pregnant and postpartum people. So given that, we wanted to share a bit of background on this topic before we turn it over to our experts and our panelists. So this figure is from the Sentencing Project and reflects the profound change in the involvement of women in the criminal justice system over the last 30 years. As you can see here, between 1980 and 2019, the number of incarcerated women increased by more than 700%. While research points to many reasons for these changes over time, we know that more expansive law enforcement efforts, stiffer drug sentencing laws, and post-conviction barriers to re-entry have uniquely affected women, especially women of color who have been disproportionately impacted by the criminal legal system. Though many more men are in prison than women, the rate of growth for female imprisonment has been twice as high as that of men since 1980. There are now more than 1.2 million women under the supervision of the criminal legal system. As the number of women in prison has grown, so too has interest in the unique needs of women behind bars, including those who are pregnant. We know from data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics that nearly 60% of women in state and federal prisons are mothers with minor children. However, there is no ongoing surveillance data on pregnancy in prison. Data from Dr. Carolyn Suffren's landmark Pregnancy in Prison Statistics study have provided us with the best estimates we have on this topic and have filled such an important gap in the literature. What we know from her study is that there are nearly 3,000 admissions of pregnant people to US prisons each year, or approximately 4% of all admissions to women's prisons. I'd encourage you to check out more of Dr. Suffren's work and the PIP study on her website, which we've linked in the chat. We also know that there are accommodations that must be made to address the unique needs of pregnant and birthing people inside. Although incarcerated people have a constitutional right to health care, there are no mandatory standards or oversight for care inside prisons, including reproductive care. A report from the Prison Policy Initiative found that 12 states had no prenatal care policy and 24 had no pre-existing arrangements for the birth of the baby. In general, we know that care for pregnant and birthing people inside has been described as inadequate, with documented cases of unethical and inhumane care in these spaces. In addition, federal rules, known as the Medicaid Inmate Exclusion Policy, prohibit states from billing Medicaid for any care of incarcerated person unless the covered individual requires a hospital stay of at least 24 hours. So while pregnant people in the community would otherwise be covered by Medicaid, this care is not covered while they're incarcerated, which has really important implications for the cost and quality of care that is provided inside prisons. We also know that there is considerable variation in the way states handle the care and treatment of pregnant and birthing people. In most states, care is handled on site until later stages of pregnancy, when patients are then seen by a healthcare provider in the community. Generally, when a person goes into labor or has a scheduled C-section, they will be transferred from the prison to the local hospital by armed correctional officers. In many states, this still includes the use of physical restraints for the pregnant person during the transport and during the hospital stay. When the pregnant person arrives at the hospital for delivery, they are generally not allowed to have any contact with family members. This means that their partner, mother, sister, or a friend are not allowed to be at the hospital with them to provide support during the birth. This is often a very isolating and painful experience for the birthing person. Typically, the birthing person is discharged from the hospital within 48 to 72 hours, returned to the prison, and thus separated from their infant. Today's webinar will focus on this separation and the support for the birthing person. But as you've heard in subsequent webinars, we plan to explore support for the caregiver in the community, the mother-infant dyad during the period of incarceration, and its support during reunification and reentry. And in each of these subsequent webinars, we plan to highlight the lived experiences of folks who are currently or formerly incarcerated and community-based organizations who are supporting these people. A growing number of community-based organizations and states have worked to respond to these complex issues around pregnancy, birth, and separation by implementing enhanced perinatal support programs, including offering one-on-one and group-based support and labor and delivery support with a doula. Today, we'll hear about work that is happening in Minnesota to support pregnant and birthing people, and hear from Autumn Mason and Ray Baker, who will share their experiences. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ray and Autumn and welcome them both, two people who offer a tremendous amount of light in my world and who I am thankful to know. Hi, Autumn. Hi, Ray.
Hi, thank you for that nice introduction and for inviting us today. I'm very excited to be here.
We are happy to have you. So Autumn, let's start with you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience of being pregnant in prison?
Sure. So again, my name is Autumn Mason. I am a mother of 4 children at this point. But in 2014, I actually was introduced to the doula project and Dr. Schlafer while I was incarcerated at Shakopee Prison. I was incarcerated at 7.5 months pregnant, and this would have been my 3rd child and 3rd delivery at that time. Being pregnant, especially that far pregnant physically, large and that far into your pregnancy, and having a prior experience of delivery, it is very intimidating and very scary to be in a situation where you lack the control of your own birth and delivery plan. So when I got to Shakopee, it was one and only things that I feared, in addition to protecting my baby while she was in utero. Shortly after my admission, I was introduced to the doula project through the parenting program that is facilitated and ran by Lori Timlin at Shakopee Prison. And that was a very, very personal thing for me because I had experience with the doula in the community with my prior 2 births. So I was very fortunate to get that support. I guess I didn't realize how fortunate, because having a doula while incarcerated is a lot more different than having a doula when you're in the community. Although the doula while you're incarcerated does support you in all the ways that a community doula would, that doula does have a special interest in an experience that not many have to share. That experience, I can go into many, many details on how difficult it was, and I'm sure you can imagine. But one thing that I will say is that the delivery was just the beginning of the experience, and it has been an ongoing experience for myself, my child, and my family. And so I'm very fortunate to now serve with the Prison Doula Project in the capacity of a doula and a peer support specialist, where it's my passion and my commitment to support women who are going through the experience that I have gone through. To be separated from a child at any point and as a mother is something that I think that all mothers fear, but to be separated from a baby that you have hardly had the chance to get to know, get to nurse, get to nurture, and have her go into the care of someone else is literally a nightmare. I was fortunate to have the support of my mom and my family, but I was also witness to so many women who didn't have the same amount of support. And so again, it has been a very passionate commitment of mine to be able to support these women and any other future women in Minnesota and hopefully throughout the nation very soon. So I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Autumn. You've mentioned the doula program, and I think it would be important for folks on the call who may not know a bit about this. Tell us a little bit about the support that you received as part of the Minnesota Prison Doula Project. What do you remember about the support that you got? What kinds of support, and what was most helpful to you?
Yes. So there are several elements of support with the doula project that I was fortunate to be able to experience. First of all, as a pregnant incarcerated woman, the support was it was related to the delivery and the birthing plan, but it was also related to the emotional well-being of myself as a pregnant person. So we met weekly, I believe at that time. We would meet weekly with a one-on-one with your doula, your assigned doula. And at that time, we would be able to discuss and prepare for the labor, the delivery, any issues that you're having while you're pregnant, kind of building the knowledge around your pregnancy and preparation for your delivery. And so when I came in again, I was 7.5 months pregnant. So I was able to meet with my doula weekly up until the birth. The doula is also, and I think it's important to state this, the doula is also permitted to give physical embrace and support. And so I'm sure many of you are not aware, but Shakopee has been a no-touch facility. And so women are not able to be emotionally or physically embraced and supported. And so that's one of the most significant things that I do remember in my experience of meeting weekly with my doula, is that she was able to give me that hug and that physical comforting that I needed. But ultimately with the labor, once you go into labor, your doula is the only person who is allowed in the delivery room to support you. Again, there are other people involved in the delivery room, including correctional officers there to supervise and warrant your, monitor your delivery. But the doula is there for your individual undivided attention. And my doula was really good at tending to my needs, my preferences, making sure that the medical staff and correctional officers respected my birthing plan and my birthing options. And so that support was very intricate in that experience. She also was able to take a multitude, over 100 pictures of the delivery of my daughter. And that is very special for us now, because otherwise she would not have any memories I would not have any memories to share with her. So I was very fortunate to have that. And she actually kept all of my pictures on a disc until I got home 2 years later, which was very personal for me. And then unfortunately, after 36 hours after delivery, the separation then does happen, and the baby is taken out of into the custody of your prearranged guardian. And in some cases, there were women who didn't have prearranged guardians, and we can talk more about that with Ray, what that looks like. But for my experience, my family came to pick my daughter up, and my doula was there to support me. I was not able to have contact with my family. I was not able to have anyone else there to emotionally support me at the time, the most traumatic experience of my life, which was giving my baby to someone else. But she was there. She actually brought a blanket for me to nuzzle with my baby during the whole postpartum period. So the baby was able to keep that with my scent on it. So there was many sentimental things that they did. And then also, like I said, the knowledge, the support is just something that you can't even compare to.
And tell us a little bit about, and we can talk about this more in a minute, but tell us a little bit more about, so that separation, your baby goes with your mom who was there to pick her up, but you can't have any contact with your mom at that time. And then you go back to prison. What kind of support did you receive when you got back to prison and were separated from your baby at that point?
So when you're at the point of separation, the doula actually is there with you to escort you back out of the hospital and into the escort van to take you back to prison. At that point, you're disconnected from pretty much all of the support that you've gotten. Other than the parenting program, once I got back to the prison, I don't feel like they did much of anything to support me. Actually, it kind of re-traumatized me throughout that experience. So when I was brought back to the prison, I was released from the hospital with supportive products and supplies. Those were actually taken and confiscated from me because they were not, prison issued, and they were not I didn't get any supplements or any replacements for them, which actually made the postpartum period very difficult. In addition to that, I was then strip searched while postpartum, and many women who have experienced that know what that feels and looks like to be postpartum, but I'm sure you can imagine to be strip searched thoroughly through that process. It was very degrading. It was very embarrassing. It was almost horrific to have to endure. And then I was actually escorted back to my housing unit to start the 6 weeks of no limited activity. But other than that, there wasn't any support. I didn't get any mental health support. I didn't get any support with postpartum. I was able to see my doula shortly after coming back to prison, within days. And I did get support from the other women who I was incarcerated with, and Ms. Timlin from the Prison Doula Project. And I will honestly say several of the guards took upon their own interest to check on me. But systemically and from the DOC aspect, there was very limited support. As a matter of fact, Rebecca, as you recall, I was introduced to you while you were, coming in to do some questioning. But at that time, I believe it was about 4.5 months later, I then realized through questioning, answering questions with you, that I had not even received a postpartum checkup. And that usually occurs 6 to 8 weeks after delivery. I do recall requesting and not getting any response, but by October, when I met you, I kind of had given up. And so one thing I would like to highlight is that after expressing and informing you of that, I was actually seen within, I believe, 24 hours for a postpartum checkup.
And we should probably maybe give a little context to the audience. We were coming in, I was in the facility doing interviews as part of a legislative advisory committee that was working towards some new legislation for pregnant and postpartum people and trying to get a better sense of the postpartum care, and had the privilege of talking with Autumn at that time. And through those interviews, identified some real gaps in care for folks inside. And it was not long after just simply asking those questions that care was received, which speaks to, I think, a number of challenges that the folks inside are often experiencing. Autumn, you didn't talk about this yet, but I know it's been an important piece for you. And we have a question from someone in the audience who I think now is a good time to talk about it. Tell us about what you could or couldn't do in terms of breastfeeding when you returned to the facility, or just lactation in general.
Yeah, sure. So that was really something that impacted me, and more so my daughter, I believe. When I was brought back to the prison, I guess I didn't prepare for the thought that I wasn't be able to express or ship any milk out to my daughter, but then also the fact that I had physical, there was physical results from not being able to suppress the milk. And so I sought medical for that. But initially, when I got back to the prison, I experienced severe engorgement. I was informed to self-compress and never seen and attended to by medical. And for the first few weeks, I was able to, manage that myself. I actually then experienced a black milk duct that I subsequently still had issues with today, but had not been seen for at Shakopee. And then by the time that they did see me 4 months later, it had kind of self-resolved. But it has been recurring, and I think that's important to note as well. But for my daughter, it was even harder for her. So I was able to, with the support of my doula, to provide breast milk and breastfeed her while we were in the hospital. And so she was able to get the, first few days of breastfeeding. When she went home and they transitioned her into formula milk, she had a really bad reaction, and it actually took several weeks and several different formulas to find the formula that was best fit for her. She actually was diagnosed with GERD and reflux at 3 weeks old, like very, very early. And she had some digestive issues as well that continued throughout her infancy. But it was really hard as a mom. I want to just know it was really hard as a mom because I would call frequently and I would hear my baby cry and my breast would leak at the sound of her cry, but I couldn't help her. And, I reached out and I asked if there was any way my family was willing to, finance it, and we were willing to do whatever we could if it was approved, that I would be able to, express the milk, store it, and ship it to her. But at that time, it wasn't an option. And as I'm aware of now, shipping breast milk is still not an option, but something that a lot of us women, incarcerated women, would love the opportunity to provide for our babies.
Yeah, and we may have time to get into some of the innovative programs that are happening across the country where folks have been able to figure out a way to support postpartum women with their lactation and storage of breast milk and shipping of the breast milk, but right at this time still not available in Minnesota. Let's turn to Ray for a bit. So Ray, Autumn has highlighted so many of the amazing components of the doula program in terms of group-based and one-on-one support and just the taking of the pictures. Thinking about your role as a doula, and you've been doing this work for a long time now, so maybe you could tell us a little bit just about your background and your work in this space. What do you think is the most important about providing support for pregnant women in prison, especially as it relates to this anticipation of their separation from their babies?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for having me on this webinar today. Autumn, of course, did a great job of highlighting the experiences that she had just in prison in general and with our program. But when I think about the most important role that we provide, it's that emotional support, right? Like going through this without having choice of where you are, who your care providers are, who your support people are at the time of delivery is really hard, and something that, you know, we just have to support them through it emotionally, because there is no choice in that. And I think when I think about when I get feedback from clients, it really is that day, that, you know, moment of birth, and then thinking ahead to the separation. We're really trying to keep focus on those positive memories of the birth, like the baby is still being born, we're still welcoming a new life into the world, and kind of focus on protecting the positive memories of that through pictures, you know, through those interactions, encouraging the nursing. All of those things are so important. And the other thing I see that our program has been able to do is to create that community within the facility. So we didn't talk a lot about this yet, but we have weekly prenatal education classes where people come during their pregnancy, but also all the way up through that first year of the baby's life. And so that group dynamic will be able to provide support to someone who's about to go through it by sharing their experiences. And that's something as a doula that I can't, you know, I'm not giving a personal experience about what they're about to go through. Like, they're getting that information from the other group members. And so that has been a really positive thing that hopefully we'll be able to bring back. It's been really hard to not go in every week with the pandemic, knowing that that support isn't there right now, but just thinking about over the years, having that room full of people that can share their experiences and support each other through it. And if you know anything about prisons, you know, people are separated in different living units and don't always see each other, might see someone in the cafeteria who's pregnant. But our group allows them to come together for a couple hours every week and support one another. So I think that's a really important aspect. And of course, I remember Autumn coming through group and during the time when she was about to deliver, and then she stayed in group for a while after to support those who came after her. And I just think that's a really important piece, just as my observations as a doula.
That separation must be incredibly hard for you as a doula as well, right? Not nearly as hard as the birthing person for sure, but really secondary trauma, I think, as many birth workers have described it. Will you talk a little bit about how you handle that as a birth worker and how you take care of yourself in being able to come back time after time and support other birthing people?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it is definitely secondary trauma. It's just unnatural to witness the separation of a new baby in a parent. It's something that is really hard to see, and I often think, and Autumn mentioned this too, is like often think about what that baby is experiencing. You know, you can't prepare a newborn that the next time that they're going to be fed is not going to be in the mother's arms and nursing. You know, and so I think about that. I think about ways to process the experience. You know, of course, we're checking in with our clients, seeing how they're doing, but then also as our team of doulas, we have a really small group of doulas that have been doing this for a long time, and we really check in with each other to process situations and just take time off when we need to, and just be really careful to not experience that burnout so that we can give our full time and attention to our clients, because that's what's most important and they're the ones experiencing it. But I think about if we weren't there, that they would be going through it alone. And so it's my clients that keep me in it and keep me coming back, of course. It's just an important source of support that I wish we had everywhere, and hopefully we'll see more of it come across the nation.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'd like to pause and just give folks a minute to put any questions from the audience. I certainly have more questions for Ray and Autumn, but we want to leave a lot of time for folks from the audience to ask some questions. So feel free, if you've got them, to put them in the Q&A, and I will monitor those as we continue to move forward with our conversation. So let's talk a little bit about what's been happening in Minnesota recently. So there have been some big changes in our state. Can you tell one of you or both of you talk a little bit about the Healthy Start Act and what this means for moms and babies and separation in our state?
Sure, I can go. I'm sure, Ray, you can fill in on the blanks, because it's very exciting for me, so I might skip a few things. So this year, we have been blessed to have the opportunity to have Governor Walz sign into law the Healthy Start Act. And what that means is that actually ends prison birth in Minnesota. So now pregnant women will not be housed in prisons, instead will be housed in community facilitated settings. These settings will be suitable for mom and baby to stay connected. They'll be able to support the birthing experience and postpartum experience, to educate mom, and then also to help gain skill and prepare mom for reentry and to have a healthy start with their new family. And so it's really, really exciting to have this, and it's the first of its kind in this nation. It was a all women-led bipartisan promoted bill. And yeah, it was passed, just this past May and signed in June. So very excited to see all the changes and new opportunities that are come with that for the future families of incarcerated people. And Ray, if you want to add anything with that.
Yeah, just sharing that excitement. We're still kind of trying to figure out what it will all entail and look like. Supposed to begin August 1st. So we're working with commissioner's office to see what it's going to look like as far as people to apply and who's going to be able to qualify. But it definitely looks like we're on our way to ending prison birth here in Minnesota. And I am thankful that that law passed and that we've been able to sort of get creative in ways of supporting the relationship of parent and new baby, and just looking at the health and all of the reasons why it's important to not separate. So very excited to kind of check in as the months go by on how that's working. And yeah, Sharon, Autumn's excitement, there's just been a lot of talk about it, and we have just meetings coming up to learn more ourselves about how it will affect our programming and the way that we support our clients, because now we anticipate supporting clients just in community settings instead of at the facility. We'll still work with parents at the facility, but hopefully the pregnant ones will be in community-based settings.
Yeah, so I think this might answer a couple of Cecilia's questions, but let's dig into this a bit. So they ask, will the Healthy Start, with Healthy Start, will you have access to your baby after birth? And additionally, what happens after birth? Are persons required to go to prison after or stay in the community program? So maybe, I know we don't know a lot yet about implementation, even though that's coming, but in theory, maybe Ray, you could talk a bit about sort of what we hope this will look like as the implementation rolls out.
So part of putting together that legislation was looking at the history of who our clients were, kind of how long they were staying, what their charges were, those type of scenarios. And we know that a very high percentage were only returning to prison for just a short amount of time, under a year, often under 6 months. And so the Healthy Start Act will allow them to stay in community. I believe it's up to 12 months post, I think. And so it could potentially mean that there could be a separation later down the line. In some cases, we're hoping that'll be a very small amount of people. And maybe in some cases, they may qualify for other things like work release that may allow them to continue to stay in the community beyond what the Healthy Start parameters are. And so we're hoping that it will, cover most people, most scenarios. We know that most people are there for like lower, kind of less violent crimes where we know that they would probably be safe in the community. And then we are looking at that aspect of development for the baby and that bonding time being, we're looking at promoting that healthier start in the community versus having an interruption in that development and bonding for a short period of time. And so it's just really what it's going to allow is an individual look case by case. And so it'll allow the commissioner to make an individual determination on what the needs are of that parent. Does she need treatment? Does she need, it's some other type of setting, or how can we serve her in the community where she can be with her baby yet still meet the needs of her sentence or whatever her case may be. So yeah, like you said, a lot to learn still, a lot to kind of figure out. They're looking at the first year as a pilot period, just kind of see who's who's going to be able to qualify and interested and how we can iron it out. I think it's going to take us a little while to really get it going, and but looking forward to the opportunity to just have it look different and be able to support these parents being together with their babies.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ray. One of the questions that has come in is about, I think, a really important one. So aside from the Healthy Start Act, sort of what was happening in Minnesota and what really is happening in other parts of the country, right, is this separation when the birthing person goes back to prison in a very short, 1, 2, 3 days after delivery, and the baby goes with a caregiver in the community. And as Autumn described, that was her mom, a person she identified to come and pick up the baby. And we have a question from Susie about after the separation in those instances, is the guardian with the baby to bring in the baby for visitation? So could one of you talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of contact after that separation?
Sure. I'll go ahead and jump in on that one. So the baby actually is subject to the exact same visitation application process as anyone else, although the baby has been born while incarcerated. For a personal experience with me, I actually was not able to reconnect with my daughter for almost 6 weeks during that process of acceptance. They expect and they require the birth certificate and other documentations and proofs, just like any other child that needs to be admitted. And so that obviously can be a little bit difficult to process or to obtain in that situation. So I had to warrant legal guardianship, temporary legal guardianship to my mom. She had to then take that and then start the process to request the birth certificate. And once that was in, they actually, once that was in, she was actually approved. So it does take a few weeks.
Yeah, and I think we've heard that quite a bit in our state, but across other states too, the delay in the paperwork to get babies approved for visitation and some of the potential policy alternatives for expediting that so there isn't a delay. Ray, in your experience thinking about when babies are placed with grandparents or other relatives, or in some cases foster care, can you talk a little bit about, Autumn had such a tremendous support in her mom and lived relatively locally to be able to facilitate visitation. But from your experience, is that common for the moms that you work with? And what are some of the challenges there?
Yeah, and that's a good point. When we think about Shakopee, it's the only state prison for women. And so people are coming from our entire state. And so sometimes it's just not possible to bring a newborn baby 6 hours each way for a visit. And it really depends on how involved the family is or how willing they are to go through that process. Yeah, we've seen longer than 6 weeks to get a baby approved. We've seen shorter periods of time. And it really depends on the type of support and where the setting that the baby is in. And if child protection's involved, it kind of depends on how good the county is at communicating or willing to set up visits, or there's a lot of scenarios. Fortunately, a lot of my clients have had visits and have had the support on the outside to be able to see their babies. And as doulas, we encourage them to have communication, even if it's just over the phone, calling, letting your baby hear your voice, and, encourage like reading over the phone to just kind of keep that connection up for both the baby and for the parent during that time of separation if it can't be in person. And sometimes there can be video visits. They're not always the greatest quality, and they can also be expensive. And so that isn't always an option for people, but that's something that people can look into. And also writing, we encourage like our clients to keep a journal, to write letters, all of these different things. And it's just a matter of kind of what your support system looks like on the outside, and it just varies. But the geography thing is something that people don't always realize, that you could be coming from a far out rural community and it's just not possible to, or even probably fair to have a baby go in a car for so long, especially a brand new baby. So it's a lot to consider. And another reason why looking at these community-based alternatives is going to be really important. There might be some scenarios where a parent can be released back to where they're from and have monitoring in their own community. whether it be home monitoring or in a treatment facility close to home to be with the new baby and maybe other children and family that they have. So yeah, that's just another thing to think about when we're implementing this Healthy Start Act, that being a huge benefit.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for bringing that back to the Healthy Start Act and the importance of identifying community-based resources where moms and babies will be best supported. We've got a great question here about sort of the filling out of paperwork, like how do you identify where the baby will go? Autumn, maybe you could talk a little bit about that from your experience, knowing that your baby was going to be able to go with your mom, but what you understood from some of the other moms in your unit or in the program about how they came to identify a person to pick up their baby, and sort of what the process, the question is about whether or not moms fill out paperwork in order to get someone approved to take the baby home, and do doulas help with that paperwork? So maybe you could both tackle that question a bit.
Yeah. So like you said, for me, I came in with the prior kind of arrangement set. So I knew that who was going to care for my baby. The process actually is that just like any other children that you have to do a temporary delegation of parental rights, where that delegates that person for to make decisions, take them to appointments, enroll them in school, and so forth. Does not allow them to have like legal full custody, long-term custody. They don't have the right to adopt a child out, change their name, anything like that. So it is a temporary status. With the coming in pregnant, we sit down with the parenting program coordinator, Ms. Timlin, and she helps you work through a plan that you find suitable. So that does look like identifying who the guardian is, making sure that there's a plan for the guardian to be able to pick the baby up, because the guardian does have a time frame that they have to be there. I believe that there's a time frame that the baby has to be picked up by. And if that time frame is not met, next step, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know from prior experience that there had been someone whose guardian never came and didn't respond to any messaging, and the baby was then taken into custody of the child welfare. So without a plan, obviously it is very critical, and it is very hard for some people to arrange those plans. I was fortunate to have that opportunity, but I've witnessed many women either the plan fall through, the person not come, or just have such a limit of options, or not have any healthy options or safe options for their children, that there are alternative options, I do believe. So Ray, you might know more about those options, but I believe there was at least one organization, a volunteer-based organization, that would provide guardianship for the babies until the mother is released. I'm not very...
Yeah, there's Together for Good is one organization that we have had clients use, and that's a temporary guardianship program led by volunteers, as you said, where if there's no child protection involvement, it's essentially just assigning this volunteer to care for your child. And I believe they take babies up to 1 year. And in those cases, I've had clients use that program, and they're very involved. They get the baby, they know the process, they get the baby approved in their local, and so they can get the baby up to the facility for visits. And so sometimes, when there isn't a good care provider, or maybe the care provider is already overwhelmed with maybe other children or responsibilities, that sometimes that is the best. It is hard because they're not able to meet the care provider of the baby beforehand. And so it's putting a lot of trust into who might be selected for their baby. And you can imagine that is very difficult, but in the cases that I have seen with clients, it has been a good experience, and even a relationship that's maintained after the parent gets out and goes home, because they're bonded with the baby and they kind of become sort of this extended family. And so that has been a great organization to work with, for sure.
Thank you both. I am trying to flow through questions here, and I'm mindful of time. You both have shared so much with us already in the time, and I feel like despite knowing you both, I've already learned things I didn't know. Autumn, this is a question that I think is a great one to think about transitioning us into the future. You mentioned that you now work with pregnant people who are incarcerated as part of the Minnesota Prison Doula Project. How does your lived experience inform the work that you do? And are there policies that impact whether formerly incarcerated people can work with currently incarcerated people?
Yeah, in regard to the policies, I'm sure that there are some restrictions. However, it seems that this new commissioner's office is very open to having previously incarcerated people involved in the process and helping support reentry and incarcerated people. So I was very fortunate to have the opportunity, especially under the administration of this new commissioner, who is very forward thinking, I'd like to say. But yes, I totally feel that my experience helps me to advocate and then also to share in experiences with them that otherwise can't be with some of the other doulas, although they have a wealth of knowledge that I don't have. I think the experience, having the personal experience makes it a different bond and connection. But also from a professional standpoint, based on having the experience, I can identify and probably troubleshoot in some ways that, because of my own experience. And then I can also prepare my clients mentally and emotionally, prepare them for some of the things that they may not be aware that they may experience.
Great. Anything that you want to add on to that?
I think it's very exciting that we can now have formerly incarcerated people come and work for us. This has not been the truth in the past. And it's been something that's been important to us, being that our program has always been, we've always considered the voices of those who are directly impacted in building the different things that we offer. It's always been what they need and want and not what we think they want. And so to be able to have formerly incarcerated people and even clients like Autumn and others on our team is just so important to us, and it's very exciting, and it's really brand new that they can be approved to come into Shakopee. So it's really good and important, and I hope that it's here to stay.
Me as well.
I agree. That's three votes for that. I am mindful we're backing up a little bit here, but in the interest of time, I want to I think I've got all the questions answered except for one that I accidentally clicked as answered. Donna asked, Autumn, did you breastfeed your first children? And I know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer. And then when we think about sort of a last question, thinking about sort of supports around breastfeeding and lactation and supports at that separation. What do you think this could or should look like in the absence of alternatives like the Healthy Start Act? So in other states, what could we be doing around the issues of lactation?
Yeah, and maybe Ray can explain more about what is happening so we can have a better scope on what can happen here. But to answer your question, Donna, yes, I did breastfeed my older two children, and I have had a fourth child since, and I have the opportunity to breastfeed her as well. And so one thing I would like to note is that none of the other three of my children have had any of the digestive issues that my third child had. So I attribute that to breastfeeding for sure.
I know we're running out of time, but to quickly add that we work in Alabama, our program does, and there's a lactation program there where we have a place where the parents can come and pump their milk, store their milk, and it actually is shipped to their baby. And so it's possible, and that's in a prison in the Deep South where maybe they're not as progressive as we are up here, and it's happening and it's successful.
Air quotes around progressive. I saw those.
We're grateful for what the advances we've been able to have here, but of course we can do better. And Autumn talked about her challenges, and since her time, we have been able to allow pumps to come into the facility, but that is not to store your milk. That is only to pump and dump to maintain lactation if you want to go home and then nurse your baby back at home. And so we've had clients that this is a good thing. We've had clients that it's really even harder to then dump out the milk that could benefit your baby. And so we're hoping to take it another step further and be able to either have care providers come and pick up milk at the facility or be able to ship it out. So, or not even have people there at all. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks for providing that additional context, Ray, about sort of where things could be going. Let me get this away here. So I am mindful of time. We are wrapping up here. I just want to remind everyone about the forthcoming webinar series that will add on to this topic. Today, we've covered the birthing person, but as you can see here, we want to address this issue from thinking about the caregiver, the birthing person and baby during incarceration, and the birthing person and baby during a period of reunification. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and especially a thanks to Autumn and Ray for coming and sharing their expertise and their stories. Autumn, you especially have been such an inspiration for this work, and you continue to be a light for me to guide all of the work that I do. So thank you for your time and sharing your deeply personal experience. We'd encourage folks to submit an evaluation. You can find that in the chat box or do a quick screen capture of that QR code. We'll look for more information soon on webinar number 2 that will focus on support for the caregiver in the community in October of this year. Thank you again for everyone for attending. A special thanks again to our speakers and to the planning committee for this wonderful event today. Thanks so much. You all have a great afternoon.